back to For the Record. As we reflect on the year in politics, we're breaking down some of the most consequential moves by lawmakers. Now, to dive deeper, I'm joined by former Republican strategist Brandon Scholes and former Democratic Mayor Dave Cieslewicz. And I want to get started by just talking about the budget this year, because we'll take a look now at the governor signing that $111 billion budget at 1:30 in the morning in July. And let's just kind of start by breaking this down. That budget included more than $1 billion in tax cuts, increased funding for the UW system and K-12 schools, and child care subsidies. But what didn't make it in this budget?
Well, about $9 billion, because it started out as a $119 billion budget, whittled down to somewhere around 100. There were all sorts of little things that were put in this budget. And they were dropped because they needed to sit down and negotiate on the big items. So for Republicans, taxes; for Democrats, it was spending on education and others. The little things that you find in these budgets, funding for different agencies and different programs, really aren't the things that are kind of on the top of people's minds. And so it's kind of easy sometimes for the legislature to negotiate it. But, you know, they did make changes to corrections in terms of some of the prisons that they wanted to change. They're still getting around to that, what they're going to do in Green Bay and shut that prison down, what they're going to do in Lincoln Hills. So you saw a lot of things that probably were scaled way back while keeping the big ticket items that they negotiated on.
And let's talk too, because Democrats were really at the table, they say, for these negotiations. What was good, what was not good?
Well, I'll tell you, what was good, I think, was the overall tone of this budget process compared to the last several. It really was a little bit more bipartisan in tone. The attacks weren't quite as vitriolic as they've been in the past. There really was some real negotiation between Evers and Vos and LeMahieu and some of the Democrats in the caucus. I think the Democrats in the legislature probably felt more involved and connected to this process than they have in previous ones. And so I welcome that. I welcome the fact that this felt like state government back when Brandon and I were more active in it, where sure, there was partisan conflict, but people kind of worked things out and they found a way to get to yes. And so I thought that was a good development.
And for each party, what were the wins coming out of this budget?
For Republicans, they were all about tax cuts, so there was $1.5 billion of tax cuts. They also removed some of the tax increases that were coming. The governor wanted to increase one of the tax levels up to 9%. They took out the ability for municipalities to impose their own sales tax on some different things. So those were, that was a big thing. And I think also they wanted to do some work on child care, on education funding, both at the university and the K-12 level.
Yeah, and I think that was a big win for the Democrats. The top priority for the Democratic Party has long been funding for public education. And so they got a very significant increase for the UW, I think the biggest in a decade or longer, and then some more money for public K-12 education. So I think Democrats can feel good about this. As Brandon points out, the Republicans have some things they can point to too. I think it's a budget both parties can run on in 2026.
And I want to move now too, because we're talking about elections. Obviously, the big one in 2026 is the governor's race. We're seeing about more than 8 or 9 in the Democratic field and about 3 right now in the Republican field. What do you think about how that's shaping up? What are going to be the big topics we're following? What are we going to be looking for in this race?
Well, I feel lonely because I'm the only Democrat not running for governor. I think, you know, for the Democrats, again, it's going to be that affordability issue. They're all talking about it. They'll go to the tried and true favorites for the Democrats. So reproductive rights, of course, is something they'll always touch on. Education funding is something they'll always touch on. If you look at the announcements from the Democrats, they've all pretty much hit on the same issues. But they'll go back to that affordability issue. And again, I don't think there's so many details they can really talk about, but they're going to hammer away at it and try to put the blame for the affordability issues on the plate of the Republicans, probably Tom Tiffany, I suppose, in the Republican Party.
The biggest problem I think Democrats will have is there are 8 or 9 in the primary. That means it's anybody's race. You could be the top person at the race, but with everybody taking a chunk out of the votes, it could be anybody's race. I mean, you know, you could say, okay, so-and-so is in the lead right now. All right, but there's not a lot of room there for mistakes. And so if they're all talking about the same issue, affordability, and if it's not solution-based, but it's recognizing a problem, that doesn't cause separation from these 8 or 9. You got 3 or 4 up here, a couple here, and 1 or 2 down here. they're going to have to make a case on these issues, whether it's affordability or prisons or whatever it is, to separate themselves from the pack, because if they don't, it's anybody's game right now, and it's early.
I disagree a little bit. I don't think it'll really come down to issues. I think it'll come down to electability. I think Democrats are still in a very practical mood. They just want to nominate somebody who can win in November. And in the end, it's not going to really be 8 candidates. It's going to be 3 or 4 who are really viable. And I think most Democrats are going to look at this very practically, and they're going to decide, well, who's the candidate who's most likely to keep the governor's office in the hands of Democrats. And I think they'll make a very practical decision. So I don't think it's going to come down to one issue. And I don't see the candidates really wanting to differentiate themselves very much on any of those things. So we'll see.
That's all I have for you both this morning. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us.